possible to implement a sound and sustainable immigration policy. So today we're going to tackle some of the issues and hopefully when we leave we'll all have a little bit better understanding. And with that, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. Nadine Brown is a graduate of University of Florida College of Law, where she was a Virgil Hawkins Legal Fellow and participated in the Family and Children's Law Legal Clinic. She began practicing immigration law in 1999. She was the supervising attorney of the Catholic Charities Immigration and Refugee Services program in Orlando. While at Catholic Services, she provided immigration services in a very wide range of areas. So she's opened her own firm in 2002, which is in Winter Springs, and she's expanded her field of practice to cases involving business immigration visas, and she has successfully completed employment-based sponsorship cases. I will let her tell us more about herself should she so desire, but please welcome Nadine Brown.
Good afternoon. So yes, I've been practicing for about 22 years. Started out with Catholic Charities, working actually with Deborah Cruz, who's sitting to my left. And I was a managing attorney. We did lots of refugee and asylum law.
The microphone's
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
We did lots of refugee and asylum law. Also worked with victims of domestic violence, family sponsorship cases, consular processing cases. Those are people outside the United States. And then I left in 2002 and started my own practice and was doing primarily immigration, but then that morphed into family law because immigrants, like everybody else, get married and need a family attorney either to do prenuptial agreements and if their relationships don't work out, divorces. So I do that as well. And those families, if they're intact, also like to do estate planning, which many of you may be concerned with wills, estates, probate, durable powers of attorney, and living wills. And then having practiced, I've come across so many people, but I'm also a working mom. And one of the things that I did with my kids is we went on a walk, and everybody, it's the beginning of the year, everybody likes to get exercise. So I said, well, let's walk up to the Walmart. So we can go out, they can have their 30 minutes, which is prescribed by pediatricians and the school board. And it's about 1.5 miles from my house, and I live off of Redbug near Tuscaloosa. And we were going to Walmart to grab a few things and then walk back. And I have an 8-year-old and an 11-year-old, and they complained the entire way. We had great walking shoes, your Nikes, your Filas, your Reeboks, whatever. And had them tote the bags back in like a little backpack. And we got home and they were glad they made it. And the other thing was that the distance to the Walmart is also their distance to school. Now they don't have to walk to school, I take them. So they're privileged in that respect. And I also had that be a lesson to them about the people that I serve, which are immigrants, and how they get to the United States. Some people are fortunate and they can afford a $1,000 plane ticket from whatever destination to the United States. They come in through O'Hare Airport, JFK, Miami, Los Angeles, or in Seattle. And some come by boat. They get on a cruise ship. They're either a stowaway or they bought their ticket. And they come in through any of the ports that we have as well. Port of Miami and Daytona Beach being another or two major locations. And then we have a lot of people who travel by foot. Again, with that exercise walking to Walmart, the other issue is many of us, my daughter wanted a Fitbit because she are from Central and South America. A lot of them are also from the Caribbean. And so they get here not by boat, not by plane, but by walking. So they don't have the luxury of a Fitbit. They don't come wearing nice tennis shoes, Reeboks, Nikes, Fila, Saucony. They're walking with whatever shoes they have. They're not bringing a bag of groceries. Sometimes they're bringing their entire belongings in a backpack. Or they've lost it along the way. And so if you're trying to get from Guatemala, which is where a large group of people are coming now because of the conditions there, and you hear it in the news, they're ending up from Guatemala to Calexico, California, which is a border town, as you can see from the map, majority of the time walking. And if they're able to get transportation, it's going to be public transportation. It's not going to be a coach, air conditioning. It may be a bus, a city bus, town bus, or they're asking somebody for a ride. Not always in the pristinest of conditions, not always in the safest of vehicles, and so they walk. And there's a caravan, if anybody's watching the news, that there's now stuck in Mexico, but they may have started 3 or 4 countries down from Nicaragua or Honduras or El Salvador. And for my clients who just came last year, actually from Haiti, and Haiti is nowhere in Latin America. It's actually in the Caribbean. So they flew from Haiti to Chile. Chile is in South America. Went to Chile, didn't speak a lick of Spanish, and went from Chile all the way up through Peru, Colombia, Panama, through Guatemala, all the way to the United States. And I asked them how they got here. They walked. They rode in a vehicle when they could. And how long did it take them? So I did the Google map. I don't know how many steps because I don't have a Fitbit. But from Guatemala to Calexico alone is just about 4,000 miles. And that's going to California. If they were a little bit more conscientious, they could have just taken a route to Texas. But a lot of people are not triathletes because when you go to Texas, there are different land barriers that you have to cross. It's not just walking, but you've got to swim. And if you don't know how to swim, the Rio Grande is going to be problematic for you. So most people are coming through to California because they can walk or they can ride. They can't swim. And so it's about 2,000 miles to Texas from Guatemala and 3,000 from Guatemala to Mexico. And it takes them, took my kids maybe half an hour to make it up to the Walmart, 1.5 miles. It takes driving from Calexico to Guatemala 35 hours or 1.5 days. That's if you have a vehicle that functions. And if you're walking, it takes about 23 days. Now, for my clients, it took them 4 months. And the other caveat or barrier was that the wife was pregnant. So we just celebrated Christmas, and we know the journey that Mary took pregnant on a donkey from Egypt to Bethlehem. And this woman traveled from Chile, gave birth in Panama, kept going all the way to the United States. So a lot of people are coming not just with a backpack, but with an infant and whatever else they can carry. Sometimes they lose their stuff on the way, and that may include their family members, because not everybody is of good health. So we may have our Fitbits and we can go to the gym, but some people, they're coming in whatever condition you find them, or they've been subject to the elements because they don't necessarily have shelter while they're traveling. And so all of that is important to note, that these are the people that are coming to the United States. Not always the privileged who are coming from Eastern and Western Europe, although we have those as well, Africa, Asia. But the clients that many Catholic Charities and I serve are coming from Latin America, the Caribbean, and Mexico. And so how do people get here? Whichever way they can. And once they get here, the next step is, what do they do? But even before that, we have to ask ourselves, why are they coming? And that is because of the notion that they have, or they've been socialized to believe that this is a land of opportunity, and wherever they're leaving is worse than whatever they can find here. So they're going off into the great unknown, not knowing what they're going to encounter. A lot of people do bring their families because they think that their children at least will have a better opportunity, whether it's education or job opportunities, depending on their age. And so we will get people who are of working age and they're just seeking an economic opportunity. I was asked to provide some statistical information, and I could put lovely graphs up, but it really doesn't impact you to know the numbers other than who we serve and why we serve them and how many are coming. And you hear that there's probably 11 million immigrants here, mainly illegal, but there's a lot of legal immigrants here as well. Those are people who have relatives who've migrated in previous decades, or who come and are able to legalize their status. And a lot of people don't know, well, how can that be? And there's a system of laws and applications and forms and fees, and nothing is exactly free. Except for the asylum process, there's no filing fee associated with that, but every other process requires that you pay for the immigration services, which is primarily fee funded, not through budget, OMB, to operate and service all those applications. For the people who legally immigrate right now, as of fiscal year 2018 and 2019, it's about 1 million people. So of those 11 or so, 1 million may have an opportunity to gain legal status either through family sponsorship, meaning a relative who's already here, or a spouse, a parent, a child who may have been born here years ago if they're over the age of 21. And they can gain status that way, if not through the refugee and asylum process, which requires each individual to write an application. So for those people who are non-English speakers, so my Haitians who came through Chile who don't speak Spanish even, or my Guatemalan who actually doesn't speak Spanish but speaks Quechua. And luckily, when I did my Latin American studies, I learned a little bit of Mayan, so because that's his heritage and that's the derivative of the Quechua language, and we were able to communicate minimally, but he's going to be asked to complete an application in English about what happened to him and why he came. And so that's why people need my services and the services of the individuals at Catholic Charities to complete this form. And we're not talking 1 or 2 pages, we're talking about maybe 10, 15 pages, who you are, where you came from, why you're here, and what you think is going to happen if you're required to go back. Insufficient detail that somebody that's reviewing will either grant it, or if they don't understand, deny it and send you back. So I was also asked to provide data or information about people who are deported, because if you go through your process, you file your applications, you pay your fee, you think either because of relationship, you're entitled or able to immigrate to the United States through one of the legal means, and for some reason you don't get approved. And some of the reasons why you wouldn't get approved would either be the person who's sponsoring you does not make sufficient income and you are considered a public charge. That means that you're more likely than not to apply for benefits, and that may be SNAP or food stamps, TANF or cash assistance, or Medicaid. Then you're going to be considered a public charge and they can deny your application on that basis. The other reasons is because there's not a bona fide family relationship. So a lot of times I may encounter individuals, you know, they think they have children, or it's on the birth certificate, however the DNA test, because that's a requirement sometimes of a child born out of wedlock to determine the relationship, may not be established. And I had a case actually recently where a gentleman called me and was very upset because he thought this was his child and had known and had acknowledged, supported this child for at least 18, 19 years, went through the sponsorship process, paid all the fees, and immigration requested a DNA test and it came back negative. So guess what? That application is not going to be processed. If you're fortunate and you're able to get your application approved, then you can become a permanent resident and then apply for citizenship at least 5 years later. But if it's denied for some reason, or you came illegally and are not eligible for any of the means of appropriate sponsorship, then you are more likely to be deported. And then what that means is you'll be placed in a removal proceeding before an immigration judge where you have to explain why you're here and what relief you're seeking. And there are people who can ask for some sort of remedy, but the great majority of people cannot. And so the people that are deported usually range in about, for fiscal year 2018, about 242,000 people. So that means that they've been picked up by a Customs and Border Patrol officer because of due process laws in the United States. They are issued paperwork that says that they have to come back for an immigration judge hearing. And how many of those actually come back varies. But of that 240,000 individuals, about 177 are detained. And I know that's a principal concern of many people is who gets detained and why are they detained. If they fail their application process or they've been apprehended because of a traffic stop or because of a domestic situation or some other means by which they get caught up with immigration and customs enforcement or enforcement and border protection. They get held by either a county sheriff's office who has an agreement with ICE, who puts what is called a detainer, or just a notice that, okay, we've held you and we're going to run you through our criminal background check, and you may have nothing but an immigration violation, but we're going to hold you so that ICE can take you and put you in a detention facility, which is usually another county jail or something, unless it's a contracted unit for specifically immigration detainees. And then of that 177,000 individuals who may be detained, the actual removals are pretty stark. They are about the same amount. So once somebody gets a deportation or removal order, they have anywhere from 30 to 100 to 120 days for immigration to arrange for a flight for them to go back to their country of origin. And a lot of them do, and then they end up back on that trail trying to head back to the United States because wherever you sent them is worse than here. So it's just to keep conscious of the fact that there are a lot of people that are here legally and illegally for a variety of reasons. They may have had harrowing journeys getting here, and the reasons or motivations compelling them can be varied. There's some people who have suffered personal trauma or family trauma, or for a lot of those people traveling from Guatemala specifically, are experiencing general lawlessness because of gang violence or narco traffickers who have extorted or put their lives in danger. And then there's a degree of lawlessness in the government where you can't trust, and trust is a big issue nowadays, your government officials, whether it's your judges or your police officers, because they may be in on it. And unlike here in the United States, and this is a big buzzword, bribery is a thing. So individuals, if there is no organized justice system in the sense of people aren't susceptible or vulnerable to bribery because of the economic conditions that they're coming from. And so your government officials, based on greed or whatever the circumstances are, may accept bribes to either make your case successful or not. If you have a case against a local police authority or just neighbors having disputes and you want an outcome, and so then your life is in danger and then you have to pack up and leave to come to the United States. So, you know, that's the journey of an individual, but for those who are already here, they also try to obtain status in any number of ways. One of the things in my bio was employment as well, is a means by which individuals can gain status if they are of a certain discipline or industry, meaning that there's a high demand and they're an indispensable worker. So if you have skills and training, not just hospitality primarily, but for those individuals who want to stay on a long-term basis, if you have a bachelor's degree or higher and you're in a profession of high demand, whether it's nursing or the tech industry, a lot of our Apple and Google employees are what are considered employment-based immigrants. And so those companies sponsor and hire from overseas and are able to get workers here as well. And they also are not included in the family-based sponsorship numbers, but they're a significant population that we rely on for, because everybody has a phone and everybody uses an app. And we need developers and we need coders. And the next big thing is the cybersecurity. And so a lot of our people are coming from India or are coming from the Middle East. A lot of our Iranian immigrants are also high in tech as well. And unfortunately, they're being targeted for a variety of reasons. But that's where our people are and where they're coming from, and why we need to be aware of the immigration issue. Is not just, illegals that are here and they're not serving us, or they're labeled and we're told that they're not good for our economy, but they're the actual bread and butter and backbone of our economy, not just our tech workers, but for the hospitality industry as well, because a lot of those illegal people who are here are coming through the borders. They're working in our hotels, the Marriott Resort, Rosen Center hotels, either doing housekeeping, maintenance, food and beverage service. And so they may be invisible to us, but they're the backbone and foundation of particularly Central Florida. Any questions?
What if there was a relatively uneducated individual who was under notice of being deported? What reason do they have if they came to come up with this data to remain?
So a lot of my job is really just education and awareness. So an individual who may not even be literate in their own language, and they get a piece of paper, whether it's mailed to them or it's handed to them at an interview or an immigration court, I explain to them what they need to do if there's enough time for them to still depart. Because a lot of times you may get an individual who either failed the process because they may be considered a public charge, or they really don't have a mechanism to gain status, because there are a lot of individuals who are also submitting applications with no basis whatsoever. And the only ways that you can really get status is either through family sponsorship or an employment sponsor, or through another means such as asylum. And so there are people who have been sold the idea that they can just submit an application, whether it has validity or not, to get work authorization, or they may have thought they had a family member that could sponsor them, and it turns out that it didn't. So they get a bag and baggage letter or a denial letter saying that you need to report to immigration, and I tell them when they need to go to comply with the law, or what their alternatives or options may be to either file an appeal or file a motion to reconsider the decision. Sometimes immigration officers are humans too. They make errors. They may have misinterpreted the law or did not understand the individual if they went to the interview, because language is still a barrier, and you're required as the applicant to provide your own interpreter. So if you don't have somebody that speaks your language or can interpret for you, either in written form or verbally, then it's going to be problematic, and you may end up with a denial and have to go home, or told that you have to go home, but how many of them actually do leave? That's the other question.
What about the person who has applied to...
Excuse me.
We can't
You
hear
asked
you.
a question, you
Yeah.
leave,
We have
go.
another...
Thank you.
You're welcome. What about the person who is in the country and has applied for, to stay here, and they're waiting in line, from what I understand? There's a number and you have to wait. What
Yeah.
about that person?
So they're individuals. So let me answer that question by explaining that our immigration process is not very straightforward. So you have family sponsorship or employment sponsorship. And it doesn't mean that you just submit an application and you get your space in line for an interview, and it's just that easy. But there are also people waiting outside the country who are not coming in illegally, but who've had family members here for a little while, and maybe decades. If you're from the Philippines, China, India, and Mexico, which have the largest populations of applicants for immigrant visas. So all those people who are coming here on vacation, they got to stand in line at an embassy at like 6 a.m. or 4 a.m. in the morning to apply to get a visa to come to the United States, unless they're from a country that does not require a visa, and we've had a treaty organization or a treaty agreement with them. Some of the Western European countries, such as Spain, Italy, England, and France, where they just bring their EC passport, European Community passport, or their British passport, or their French passport. They can come in for 30 to 90 days. But so if they're a family member and they're not from the European Union or Britain, who's planning their Brexit, then they have to stand in line, and so they have visa queues. So they have a category of applicants based on who's sponsoring them and who's being sponsored. So if you're a U.S. citizen sponsoring a spouse, you get priority. But if you're only a permanent resident, which means that you have a green card and you're sponsoring a spouse, you get lower priority, and you got to stand in a different line and wait a different time. And then if you're from Mexico, Philippines, China, and India, you have to wait a different time just because of your nationality, because of the volume of applicants that are coming from those countries. And so some of those individuals, it may have been a couple decades ago that somebody sponsored them, and they have to wait a few years before they're eligible to complete the process to get their own green card. And they may have, in that time, because of patience, and we're not very patient, my 8-year-old is not very patient, they want to come, and they may find another way to come to the United States while they're waiting those 20 years or those 10 years, because that's how long the category that they're in is supposed to wait for their legal status. And then that, unfortunately, hampers the end result. That means that when they come, they're not eligible for work authorization. So while they're here, they're maybe working under the table illegally, but they want to be reunited with family members because it's taking so god-awful long, but they have to wait the process just because the way that it is designed, an individual who's a permanent resident from a specific country or has a specific relationship, maybe not a spouse, but a child, has to wait maybe 8 or 9 years before they can reunite with that family member who sponsored them.
Okay, I'm going to have to ask that, Nadine, are you going to be able to stick around for a few minutes? Because we need to move on to our next speaker. And Zelda, I have